Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be showing you guys, or I should say talking to you guys about all the sweaters that I've sample knit. So a while back I did all the sweaters that I have in my collection right now, the ones that I've knit for myself. I obviously have those physically that I could have showed you guys, but in this video I do not have any of the sweaters, but I do have photos that I've taken of the sweaters before I sent them off to their new homes. So I will be putting those on the screen for you. I've also talked about all of these sweaters in a podcast in years past. So I started my podcast in I think like 2018, 2019. So all of these sweaters have been featured in a podcast at some point. So if you want more information on them, you can definitely find those by scrolling through my podcast playlist here on YouTube. Also find more photos of them on my Ravelry page, and I'll also link all of the patterns down below, as well as the yarn that I use to sample knit the patterns down below. So you can find everything I talk about today in the description box down below, as I've mentioned 100 times. So I have my list here of sweaters that I've sample knit, and I have my coffee and my pup, so let's get started. So I started sample knitting in 2019 at the very beginning, and 2019 was a really tough year for me. Probably the hardest year of my entire life. So I really dove into knitting during that time to help me cope. I was a dog walker and I was knitting. So those were the two things that I was doing to fill my time, pay my bills, and those sorts of things. So if you're not familiar with how sample knitting works, generally it works by you get sent yarn from a company or a small yarn business, a yarn store, whatever the circumstances, somebody sends you yarn to knit a pattern for them. You knit the pattern and you send it back. There's different forms of payment. A lot of the forms of payment that I received was compensation in yarn. So however much yarn I used to knit the project for them is how much yarn they would send me in return. Some of these places I received gift cards so I could purchase whatever I wanted from their website, from their storefront. So I'll kind of mention that as I go through here, like what I received in return. And if I've made something with that yarn since then, I'll also put it on the screen because I think that'll be fun. But like I said, I started at the beginning of 2019 and then I did my very last sample knit in 2021. I only did one in 2021, and that's kind of when I decided that I wanted to just make for myself strictly at this point in time. But I would honestly own any of these sweaters again. If the opportunity presented itself for me to own one of the sweaters that I've sample knit in the past, I would love to own that item. So if any of the companies are watching this and you need to get rid of some samples that I knit for you, let me know, because I would be interested in having it back in my life. So we're going to go ahead and start off. The very first sample knit I ever did was the Nordishka by Caitlin Hunter, and I knit that for Cozy Posy Yarn Company. I casted it on January 10th, 2019, and I finished it January 27th, 2019. So I was pretty inexperienced whenever I knit this one, so I think my gauge was a little bit smaller, and there was a little bit of confusion. So I finished the project in the timely manner, got it sent back. She was in Canada. She got the item, and then I got some yarn in return. I haven't used that yarn yet because the yarn that I asked for was applied yarn, and the yarn that she sent me was a single strand, and so I haven't ever had the desire to use a single strand, what is it called? A single ply? I haven't had the desire to use a single ply yarn. It is fingering weight, and it is in the dried flowers colorway or something like that, but I haven't used it. It's still in my stash. So that was a fun pattern though. I actually knit the Nordishka twice. I knit one for myself and then I did the sample knit. So I did the sample knit first and it got sent back. It was finished, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like a really fun experience for me. It was really the first color work that I did. I probably had some color work, small things like hats and stuff, but the first real piece that I knit for somebody else or for myself that was in fingering weight yarn, color work, construction that I had never done before. It has cables on it. So it was a lot of fun. I was a very big Caitlin Hunter fan at the time, so I was excited to just knit that sweater in general. And having my very first sample knit, I was definitely nervous about, but it really opened a door for me, as you'll see. So then right after I finished that, I actually did another sample knit for another Canadian company called Hello Stella. I still love Hello Stella yarn to this day. She's definitely changed her yarn dyeing style. I would say, over the years. And whenever I knit the Maritimo, which is the next sample that I did, she was definitely in that like poppy, colorful vibe that I adore still to this day. So I was really, really excited that she chose me to knit this one for her. The Maritimo is also by Caitlin Hunter. It is a t-shirt style with some lace on the bottom, and there's 3 different colors of yarn in this one. And the top, like the main color that I did for her was like this speckly, colorful, I don't know, it was like orange mostly. And then it had like a darker blue, like periwinkle color as the outline, and then like a seafoam green as the lace. And unfortunately, with this one, the orange color bled into the seafoam green kind of color, which was really sad. But I casted this project on February 5th, 2019, and I finished it February 12th, 2019. And I do distinctly remember, like, I was very careful with gauge. It was spot on the right size. And I knit it so quickly. I had so much fun making it. It's a bottom-up sweater, and really that's what I was most comfortable with at that time anyways. I feel like I started with bottom-up sweaters and it made the most sense to me. And the lace was fun. The colors were amazing, which I think is what kept me most interested. Like I said, I love Hello Stella. I still do to this day. Still follow her and keep up with her. In return for this, I actually got yarn. I think she sent me a gift card. And I ended up getting yarn from her Van collection, which I got the green color and a tan color. I got 3 skeins of the green color and a tan color. And I used the green tweed color to make my Aruhu sweater. And then I still have the tan color in my collection to this day. I imagine that I'm going to use it as a contrast at some point. It's a tweed yarn. I love that. Maybe even for socks. Anyways, moving on. That was the Maritimo that I used Hello Stella yarn for. And then after that, I didn't do my next sample knit until March of 2019. And that is whenever I knit a pair of ribbed socks for Explorer Knits and Fibers. So I was really excited to be chosen by Explorer Knits and Fibers for this sample knit. I remember I've been following her since before she was dyeing yarn. She was just a knitter and she just did like hats and things that everybody else was doing. And then she started dyeing yarn and her name was Ford Explorer Knits and Fibers. And so I still want to call it Ford Explorer, but it's Explorer Knits and Fibers. I knit a pair of rib socks out of one of her national park colorways. Sorry. And it was just a basic pair of rib socks. I made those for her. It took me from March 27th to April 4th, 2019 to make those. And I was so excited to be knitting for Allie because like I said, I had followed her for so long. The fact that she trusted me to make some socks for her was just awesome. And in return for those socks, I got the exact same sock set that I used to knit the sample for her. So I ended up making myself a pair of socks with that yarn as well. So I have a matching pair, except they're not ribbed. So I guess they're not matching. So that was like a smaller project that I did in between. And then I didn't knit anything again until May when I knit the Novelli tee for my friend Jen over at Lane and Lotus. I feel like we've kind of been following each other on social media for a while. And so at that point, like, I was familiar with her stuff. I think she was familiar with my stuff. Sometimes we'd send random DMs. And then she started dyeing yarn. And she needed a sample knitter for the Novelli tee by Caitlin Hunter. And I was, like, really getting into the sample knitting thing. As you'll see after this one, I really committed myself to doing sample knits in 2019. It was really the thing that got me out of the depths of what could have been a major depression. So it was really exciting that these people were trusting me with their yarn, and this Novelli sweater was the one project in my entire knitting career that I feel like I nailed. The color work was pristine, the gauge was spot on, the construction, the fit, everything was amazing, and Jen still loves it to this day. And honestly, without Jen's color choices of this royal blue and this gold and this cream color, this sweater wouldn't have been what it was. She did an amazing job, and her yarns are always so consistently dyed. Like, the blue was just seamless. There were no like splotches or anything in it. So just the depth that she gets in her colorways made this knit so enjoyable. It has like a ribbed shoulder, and I know that it has like a fold over sleeve, so it's all like the royal blue, and then the fold over in the sleeves underneath was a gold color, and the color work on the bottom was just like crisp. I did an amazing job, not to toot my own horn, but I was so proud of this piece. I remember I didn't want to let go, but part of sample knitting is the letting go. So you really have to go into it like, okay, you're making this, you're getting rid of it afterwards. You don't get to keep it. And I was fine with that. I love gifting things to people, and I know the joy that this sweater has brought Jen is just like totally worth getting rid of it. Although, like I said, I would totally have it back in my life someday if she were to get rid of it. I absolutely love that one. It took me from May 29th to June 13th, 2019 to make, so it was a fairly quick knit as well. Like during this time, I knit so many sweaters and it's all I wanted to focus on. It was the one thing that kept my mind busy. So you'll see that I was able to knit these sweaters very quickly, not only because I wanted to meet the deadline that was given to me, because typically with sample knitting, you are given a deadline and it's usually fairly short, like 6 weeks or so for a sweater, depending on when the person needs it or how intricate the sweater is and how small the yarn is. Almost everything that I made sample knit wise was with fingering weight yarn because that's what I prefer to make with. I just love fingering weight yarn. I love to knit with it. I love the feel of it. I love to wear it. So most of these were fingering weight sweaters. I think most of my timelines, it depends on who the person was either like 6 weeks, 2 months, 1 month, something in that area. So definitely loved that knit, that Novelli tee. I was so proud. I remember I had started it and then I had to frog it because I wasn't happy with the gauge and I was getting a little bit discouraged, and then I started over and it was just smooth sailing from there. I'm very happy with that piece. I think about it and sometimes I'll just go back and look at the photo of it to this day. So yes. And then right after that, I made another sample knit for Lane and Lotus. Oh, for the Novelli tee, I actually think I ended up getting the yarn that I used recently for the sheer V sweater. I think I got that pink yarn. I got 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn and then 2 skeins of mohair that I used to make the sheer V by Jessie May. I'm pretty sure that's the yarn that I got in exchange for the Novelli tee. And then right after the Novelli tee, I did another sample knit for Lane and Lotus. Me and her became like kind of a little pair. I loved to sample knit for her and she was always seemed to be happy with my end result. So I did the Soldotna crop by Caitlin Hunter. As you can tell, this was a very Caitlin Hunter time in 2019. Everybody wanted her patterns made for them. Everybody wanted to knit them. So pretty much all I've made up until this point was Caitlin Hunter patterns. I did the Soldotna for Lane and Lotus. It was just a really cute little piece. I think everybody kind of remembers the Soldotna. It was a DK weight sweater, short sleeves, a colorwork yoke, and then a fleece stitch in the body. And she used very subtle colors. So she used like a main color for the body that was like speckled, and then you have the fleece stitch in there. So it kind of just elevated the speckles a little bit. She made very good color choices with like a brown, a creamy speckle color, a pink, and then like a light minty seafoamy color. It was a lot of fun to knit. I knit it very quickly. I actually have a full video on the Soldotna that I will try to remember to link down below. But I made that. I casted it on June 25th, 2019. I'm sorry, August 25th, 2019, and finished it August 30th, 2019. So in 5 days, I finished that, got sent back to her, and was ready to move on to the next project, which was my Taroko sweater. This is a crochet sweater, and I didn't write who it was by down, so I'll try to put the name of the designer on the screen. But like I said, this was a crochet sweater. This is the only crochet project that I think I've done. Yeah, pretty positive, the only crochet project I've done. And it was for the farmer's daughter, which was so cool. I was so excited to be chosen to do this sweater, and honestly very nervous because it was colorwork crocheted sweater, short sleeve, kind of like the Soldotna. It was definitely a mock to the Soldotna, and this one was very intimidating. It took me a while, but once I powered through the yoke, everything just like went so much faster because I finally got that stitch down. It's like a center crochet stitch and it's all in single crochet, so it's a lot of work but totally worth the result. It was so cute. It had like color work and then a mix of lace in it. And it was just heaven. Like I said, once I like got into it, I got into it and I dug through and I finished that sweater and it was so cute. I was so proud of it. Made that. It took me from August 15th to September 6th. So this one definitely took me a little bit of time to complete, but I did have a deadline and I think I finished it and shipped it out on the day that I was supposed to have it shipped out. So I was very proud to have it done. very sad to say goodbye to this one because this one was, like I said, a labor of love. It was crochet. Crochet is my first love. I don't really crochet much anymore due to my hands. It just really bothers my hands, so I'm not able to do it as much. So I would totally love to have this one back in my life someday. I don't know if that would ever happen, but I'm manifesting it now. I would love to have the Taroko sweater back into my wardrobe. I just think it was really cool. It was done with this single ply in the Farmer's Daughter, and it was just a lot of fun. I totally enjoyed it and recommend that sweater if you're a crocheter. Definitely check it out. This designer, I think, has a lot of crocheted sweaters that you should definitely check out. So I'll have her link down below, and hopefully you guys will find so much enjoyment with that as well. So after that little break from some Caitlin Hunter knitting, I was back on the Caitlin Hunter and I knit the Sunset Highway for Harbor Fibre. And this one was a lot of fun. It was, it's a colorwork sweater, and she had like a gray speckled color, which is the yarn I ended up getting in return for knitting the Sunset Highway. I haven't used it yet. It's still in my stash. It used like a peachy color and a purple color, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun. It was a big sweater and I really enjoyed making it. It did take me a little bit of time. It took me from July 1st, 2019 to September 10th, 2019. Why it took me that long, I'm not sure. I imagine it's because I had other deadlines that were a lot shorter than the deadline she had given me for that one. And also, I think I might have run out of yarn and needed her to send me more yarn. Pretty sure that's the sweater that happened with. And like I said, I got the Toasted marshmallow colorway in return that I still have. I have used some of it for a hat that I made a friend, and it turned out really cute. And I'm kind of just hoarding the yarn for myself because it's a much softer yarn than some of the other fingering weight yarns. Like, I think it's just super wash. I really enjoy it and I want to make something with it, but I just haven't figured out what yet. The Taroko sweater, I actually don't really remember what I got. I actually think that I got a gift card and I ended up getting Chiagu knitting needles, which is how I got my Chiagu knitting needles. And I also think I just got a bunch of wool wash to fill up the rest of the gift card. So that was like the best exchange that I got because I got the tools that I still use to this day that I probably never would have bought for myself for like years. So I really enjoy my Chiagos. Like I said, I still use them to this day, and they came from a sample knit that I did. For the Soldotna, because I forgot to tell you guys as well, I think I ended up getting yarn to make the Swancho, the Nanilchik Swancho by Caitlin Hunter, and I also bought some to go with it because I didn't have enough credit. So I used part of it to get the colors for the Nanilchik Swancho that I still haven't made, but I still plan on making. I just haven't decided to make it yet. After the Sunset Highway, I made the No Frills sweater for Explorer Knits and Fibers. I did this with just a very neutral tweed yarn and Herceria alpaca. I actually didn't get a picture of this one for myself. I knit it on September 10th to September 21st, so it was a super quick one. I really had to punch this one out and get it back to her, I remember. Didn't even have time, like I said, to grab a photo of it. I don't know if I even got to talk about it in a podcast. I probably did, and then I just inserted the footage. But Allie got a photo of it, and I hopefully will have that on the screen for you. But this was a fun one. Everybody was making the No Frills. I had already made one at this point, so I was familiar with the pattern, which was good because I was fairly new to knitting when I knit mine, and I was definitely very confused by the pattern when reading it. But by the time I did the one for Allie, it was smooth sailing. I don't have a lot to say about this one because it was so quick and I barely remember it. And like I said, I didn't even get a photo of it. And yeah, it's just a basic top-down raglan sweater. Everybody knows the No Frills. It was super popular at this time. 2019 was like the year that all these patterns, the trendy patterns, were like all I wanted to make. So sample knitting was great because I didn't necessarily want to wear them or own them, but I wanted to make them and fit in and talk about them in my podcast and blah, blah, blah. I'm not as much that way anymore with like trendy patterns. I kind of like to just make the ones that I want to wear for myself. So I was glad I got to do it in this sample knitting period, and now I'm more apt to make patterns that I enjoy more and want to talk about and I'm excited for, rather than the trending ones that everybody's talking about, because there's so much out there. After the No Frills, I had somebody reach out to me that had a very, very small yarn company. They no longer dye yarn. I don't even know if they're on social media anymore, but it was 19 Fibres, and it was the Lofoten sweater by the Blue Mouse. I just have a couple photos of it. This one was kind of the one where you have to be careful. when you're making sample knits for smaller companies, you really just want to be cautious of knowing who that person is and if they're trustworthy, because I knit this sweater for her in just a basic purple yarn. It took me from November 7th when I cast it on till November 30th, and it was like one of the larger sizes. So it definitely was a labor of love. It was fingering weight yarn, one of the largest sizes. And yeah, it just takes a lot more time. And that was time that I also had other sample knits that I needed to do going on. So, you know, I did invest my time and energy into the sweater. I sent it back to her, and I had a really tough time getting payment in return from this person. So when you're going into sample knitting, just make sure you can trust the people that you're sample knitting for. Make sure they're trusted companies. Like I said, she was very small, didn't have a big following, but she reached out to me and asked if I could knit her this sweater. And I was like, yeah, I would love to, because I was so trusting. And this was something that I had been doing for a little bit by this point, and I just assumed that it was going to go smoothly. But I ended up having to like keep messaging her, and then it was like months later, like months, I finally sent her a message and said, hey, look, I need you to send me payment, or I'm going to send you an invoice on PayPal for my time and like energy on what it took me to knit this sweater if you don't send me the yarn that you promised me. So eventually she finally did send me the yarn. Thankfully, I didn't have to go and send the invoice and start any drama or anything. I probably would have ended up just letting it go, but I really didn't want to be that person anymore. I really wanted to start learning to stand up for myself, and that is something that you need to do when you're going to be in a business like this, is stand up for yourself, have your own voice. So luckily she did some of the yarn. She sent me some green yarn. I told her I didn't even care what the yarn was, I just need my payment. So she sent me a green yarn and like a skein of bear yarn. And honestly, I was a little like annoyed, but it was fine. I got what was promised to me, so I let it go. I still have the bear skein of yarn, I'm pretty sure. And then the green yarn I actually turned into the Igawa sweater by Junko Okamoto. So you guys have seen me knit that. I just used all of the green yarn that she gave me to knit that sweater, and it's out of my stash. So that is my story on being cautious of who you are sample knitting for. After the Lofoten, I did my weekender, and this was the first sweater that I sample knit for a local yarn store. So in Columbus, Ohio, they have 2 local yarn stores. Well, they have more than that, but 2 main ones that I always shopped at. My favorite one, which was right near where I lived, was 614 Knit Studio in Clintonville. And I adore that knit studio still to this day. The owner's name is Andrea. She's very sweet. And I don't even know how I came about getting to sample knit this sweater. I think I was shopping in there and we were talking, and she asked if I would sample knit the sweater for her, The Weekender by Andrea Mowry. She gave me West Yorkshire Spinners croft yarn, and it was really cool. It was a digital printed yarn, and she asked me to make The Weekender for her, so I did. This project took me from January 25th, 2020 to February 9th, 2020. So this was the first ones I did in 2020, and yeah, it was just an enjoyable knit, and it was really fun to do it for my local yarn store and gain the trust of her, because I did do some more sample knitting for her afterwards. But for this sweater, I think that I ended up getting a gift card. I don't even remember. I think, yeah, I know she gave me gift cards for the other ones that I did afterwards, so I probably got a gift card or something. Can't quite remember, but I would have just exchanged it for yarn, of course, or maybe some pom-pom magazine or something. But the weekender for 614 Knit Studio using West Yorkshire Spinners craft yarn was a lot of fun. It was a pretty quick project. I think 25th of January to the February 9th, like I said, pretty fast. So it was a lot of fun. I think it was like a worsted weight yarn. It's reverse stockinette, and then it has the slip stitch down the front with the ribbing on the shoulders. Long sleeve. It fit her amazing. It looks so good on her. I actually really liked it on myself too, but it looked way better on Andrea. After that, this is kind of when my life like got turned upside down, and I was moving out of Columbus and transitioning to whatever my new life was going to look like. So this is kind of the period of time where I was just trying to finish this. I know in between here, I did another sample knit of socks for Ford Explorer Knits and Fibers, or Explorer Knits and Fibers, but I didn't have a photo, or I didn't make a Ravelry page for it, so I don't quite remember any of the details. So in this period of transition, I did those socks, and then I did the Alejandra shawl by Hoki Loki Telly for a Playful Day yarn. This was a fun mosaic knit shawl. This is actually one of the first shawls I ever knit and one of the only shawls I've ever knit to this day. It was a lot of fun. I really just wanted to sample knit for a Playful Day yarn because I had been following her and I really liked the colors of her yarn and how they were just natural colors. And the shawl looked like a lot of fun, and it was. I didn't end up getting to do the tassels. I made as many tassels as I could, and then I ran out of yarn. So I sent it all back to her, but the only photos I got were without tassels. It was a lot of fun. It took me from February 14th to March 15th. And the only reason it took that long is because I ended up getting really sick at the end of February, which now when I look back on it, I think it was COVID. This was at February 2020. So it was right when it was starting to become a thing. And then that's whenever me and my husband separated and I moved in with my in-laws for a short period of time. So it was just a really hard time for me to knit. But I did power through it and I did finish it and get it sent back to her, which I'm proud of. Then after that, I really started picking back up on the knitting again. I moved back in with my parents in Indiana, and before I did, I had this relationship with 614 Knit Studio, and she asked if I could do some more sample knitting for her. I did just tell her about the situation of me moving back to Indiana, but she was fine with that, and she shipped me a box of yarn and asked me to make some sweaters for her. So the first sweater I made for her was the Limpy Cardigan by Vera Valimaki, and I knit this for 614 Knit Studio in the Woolfolk Luft yarn. And this was a really fun make. I'm sorry, I'm gonna step back 1 second. The Alejandra shawl, I got yarn returned to make another Alejandra shawl, so it was the exact same colors. I still have that yarn in my stash, so I will probably make something with it in the future, but I haven't yet. But back to the Limpy cardigan. I really enjoyed this cardigan. It was so weird and cool, but it was fun, and I got to use a yarn that was really cool and new to me. I actually made a yarn review video on this yarn, so you guys can check that out on my channel as well. But just the construction of this yarn, or this sweater, was a lot of fun. I made it when it was starting to get warmer outside, so yeah, it's made out of a blown yarn, so it's a lot lighter, but it was still like a thick sweater because the yarn is bulky weight. You remember there's a ton of ribbing, which I didn't love, but it just looks amazing on the cardigan. And this sweater looks so good on Andrea. I hand delivered this one and the other one I made for her to her back in Columbus, which was just a really nice, refreshing thing to get to go on a little trip with myself. And when I got there, she gave me a gift card for everything that I had made for her, and I got to go on a little yarn shopping spree, and that was a lot of fun. I remember really enjoying that. But the Limpy cardigan, I keep wanting to call it the Limpy Cardi because it sounds like it just flows, but the Limpy Cardigan by Vera Valimaki took me from April 15th, 2020 to May 13th, 2020. So just about a month. It felt like it took a lot longer, but I really enjoyed this cardigan, and I remember distinctly talking about it on a podcast a couple times. So yeah, definitely check out my old podcast from 2020 if you want to see these upcoming ones. Like I said, she sent me yarn to make her a couple sweaters in that box. So she also sent me the yarn to knit the Throw Over by Andrea Mallory. So 614 Knit Studio sent me Hudson plus Westco yarn. I actually did a yarn review on this yarn as well that you'll find on my channel. And this sweater took me like no time at all. I started it on May 21st, 2020 and finished it May 27th, 2020. So this one was like on my needles and off the needles so fast. It was so enjoyable to knit. I think it's like a worsted to bulky weight yarn, and it's got color work in the yoke, and then it's just plain stockinette, and it was so fast and simple, but such an effective sweater. It was so cute. This is definitely one I would really enjoy having back in my collection someday. It looks great on Andrea, but I really loved it and actually had a decently hard time getting rid of this one. Something I really enjoy about sample knitting is you don't get to choose the colors that they send you. You don't get to choose the pattern that they send you or the size that they send you. They send you all the instructions on what they want you to make for them, and you have to make that. And through sample knitting, I've found like sizes that work better for me that I would have never have tried, patterns that I would have never have tried, colors that I would have never put together, like worked so well together, which leads me into the next one that I want to talk about, which is the Once in Floral sweater by Maxim Cyr that I hand knit for Handmade Home Fibers, which is also now known as Sorella Fibers. This one took me from May 4th to June 8th, 2020, which was a lot faster than I thought, considering like this one is a labor of love. I knit like a size large, I believe, in this one, and it's a color work yoke using 3 colors in the yoke. and it was just so intense for me because I don't necessarily love color work, and then having to use 3 colors at a time was a lot, and it's fingering weight yarn, and the colors that I was using were like such low contrasting colors as you'll see in the photos, so you really had to pay attention. But like I was going back to what I was saying about you don't get to choose colors or patterns, I would have never knit this pattern, definitely never would have chose a low contrasting color. But this sweater I miss so much. I think about this sweater all the time. The fit of it, the color choices, the pattern itself. I really want to own this sweater again someday. I don't know that it'll be in my future, but if Sorella ever did do a sample sale or offer this sweater back to me, I would 100% take it. It was just really cool, and I remember finishing it and feeling so good about myself, and this was like the point where I was starting to get my footing again and just trying to figure out what the next steps were for me. And I just felt so empowered whenever I finished this sweater because it is a labor of love, and it made me feel beautiful, and it made me feel proud and confident in my skills, and I think she loved it. So overall, this sweater was probably one of the top ones up there with the Novelli tee that I did as a sample knit. And for this sweater, I got a gift card that I ended up using to get some yarn from her Maui collection. I got 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn and 2 skeins of mohair, I believe. I've used the mohair, but I still have the fingering weight in my stash, so I haven't used it yet, but I am saving it because it's so special and I love it and I can't wait to use it, but I want to make sure I use it for the right pattern. After I knit the Once in Floral by Maxim Cyr for Sorella, I decided to take a break from sample knitting. I was starting to work again and get my life back together and figuring out what I wanted to do as far as my living situation. So I took a break and was just knitting for myself. I also started to buy a house, and just a lot of changes were happening in my life. But once I bought my house and got settled in, I did another sample knit for Explorer Knits and Fibers. This is the last sample knit that I've done, and I'm glad that it was for Allie. I always love sample knitting for her. I knit the Sienna pullover by Sari Nordland for Allie. This is a DK or worsted weight sweater that has like an all over texture to it, and it's got a really cool twisted rib details on all of the cuffs with like a little zigzaggy situation happening. This one took me from May 8th, 2021 to June 13th, 2021. And when I was knitting this one, this is when I realized that my sample knitting career was over for the time being. I was not enjoying doing it. I wasn't excited about it. I just wanted it off the needles. I know I did a great job on the sweater, but I know that there was no love in the sweater. So I think I lost my passion for knitting professionally over the period of June of 2020 to the time that I knit this one. I totally lost my passion for professional knitting, if you will. Knitting was my full-time job for a long time, and sample knitting became part of that. So it was just a lot of fun to be able to create content with the pieces I was sample knitting and create joy for the yarn owners and them getting to see their yarn knit up into something that they can share with others. But for me, it just wasn't there anymore. I wanted to focus on myself because I had put so much energy into focusing on other parts of my life for so long that I wanted to selfishly knit for the rest of however long. So that is what I am continuing doing now, is just selfishly knitting for myself, for my YouTube channel, and the ways that I want to, opposed to trying to fill that with filling other people with joy. I want to fill myself with joy now. So that is everything I knit over a 2-year period, about a 2-year period. Highly recommend, if you want to get into sample knitting, to just put yourself out there. They do test or sample knitting calls on Instagram. I'm sure they probably do them on TikTok and stuff now, but I don't really watch any of that stuff. So I always found mine through Instagram. I found some companies that I really believed in, people that I really liked and enjoyed talking to as friends. And then I just started putting myself out there slowly with other places. And once you build your name is out there. And as long as you're doing a good job, they're going to keep wanting to have you come back and sample knit for them because they can trust you and they know you're going to do a good job, get it back to them in a timely manner. And it's all about just being confident and selling yourself and taking pride in your pieces and your work and just having a good time with it. So that is all that I've done as far as sample knitting goes, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below on what your favorite sweater that I ever sampled knit it was, and subscribe to my channel for more random content. Bye!